My name is Frances Dinkelspiel. I live in Berkeley, California.
I'm Deborah Friedman, and I live in Walnut Creek, California.
And we are third cousins.
Mm-hmm.
So at around October 2020, during the height of the pandemic, I got an email from Deborah saying that she had discovered some very disturbing information about our mutual ancestor, our three-time great-grandfather, Levi Hess. And what did you find, Deborah?
Well, I had an 1840 census in my file drawer, and I think I got it years ago when I was researching when you had to do it all by hand. And I finally took it out and took another look at it, and I realized that there were 2 pages to that 1840 census, and that there were what I thought were check marks, but they're actually numbers on page 2. And I realized that the household had a young woman, I think about 13 years old, that was an enslaved person, and this was horrifying.
So this was very surprising to us because Levi Hess was an immigrant from Germany, and he arrived in New Orleans in 1834. And we, as Jews, naturally and inaccurately made the assumption that Jews who were oppressed in Central Europe, who came to America for religious freedom, would not be participating in oppressing other people. But it turns out that that is not the case at all. Jews living in the South owned and enslaved people at the same rate as other white people enslaved them. But that was information that we discovered later. After Deborah sort of sent out this email and she called this family history, she then took one more step to find out about another enslaved person who...
Right, so I took this information. I went to the River Road African American Museum in Donaldsonville, Louisiana, which is where they lived, and said, "Can you help me find information about this woman?" And she immediately faxed me or emailed me a conveyance record that talked about a slave that Levi Hess purchased in 1845. But the trouble with that information was that meant there were at least 2, because there was one that was present in 1840, and then one that was purchased. Ruthie was the name of the woman that was purchased in 1845. Right. And then...
So we did further research, and what we discovered that was that there was a group of people, our mutual ancestor, his brother, a brother-in-law, and a sister who was married to another man, had jointly been in business together. They opened dry goods stores in New Orleans, Donaldsonville, Louisiana, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And collectively, we've discovered so far that they enslaved at least 16 people.
And I suspect there's more.
Right. So, as I said earlier, this was a big surprise because we'd made this assumption that it wasn't our problem. So, but one of the mysteries in our family was that they left Louisiana around 1851, and they sold all the enslaved people. Many of them came to California for the gold rush, and some of them went to New York and Montgomery, Alabama. So they, like, their period of enslaving people was distinct and short. But one of the other interesting things is that, California, people don't really know this, California entered the Union as a free state, but there was a lot of pro-slavery sentiment in California. And so I think about the fact that our ancestor came here, was an early settler in San Francisco and carried this pro-slavery sentiment with him. So in some ways, the harm that he did directly to people in Louisiana, he also carried it to California.
So one of the things that's been difficult for me is growing up always feeling like me, my family, that victims of anti-Semitism and victims of the Holocaust, that to have to shift, discovering this information, to have to shift from the victim role to the perpetrator role, and that was really hard and is taking some work.
So one of the questions we talk a lot about is how do we make repair? How do we grapple with this information? And there are a few things that we've been trying to do. One is daylighting the information. You know, we had no clue that this was part of our family legacy. Nobody talked about it. Nobody in all the
Even my progressive grandmother.
right, in all the recorded family histories, there's no mention of slavery. So we don't really know what people knew. And also, we know Levi Hess lived in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. And so there is this very interesting and important institution, the African American River Road Museum in Donaldsonville. So we have, you know, individually made donations to this museum. We've tried to get our relatives to make donations to this museum. We've only been slightly successful. So in terms of making repair, that's been sort of our most explicit thing that we've done. But we're talking still about what other things we can do. If we can make a scholarship, if we can do something that's more tied to our family and the location of this. But we're still in the early stages.
And I mean, one thing that I think is really important for us to do is really encourage the rest of the family to get on board here, because mostly we've been met with silence. I don't think people are against learning about it. They are disturbed enough to be afraid to talk about it. And I think that that's one place where, you know, the more I can find out about what actually happened, the more we can put it out there. I have a website. I think we'll contribute to the Black History Wiki tree, and as much as we can do in that way is a start. Anyway.